Have you noticed how our lives are getting longer, but the average age of puberty is actually dropping? So the average lifespan is increasing, but it's like the age of puberty is moving in the wrong direction. So if we look back at the turn of the 20th century, puberty was reached at around 17 years of age. Today we're at an all-time low with an average age of only 12. And if things keep moving in the same direction, it'll mean the age of puberty will drop into the single digits, which is just way too low. So scientists, they can't explain it, especially since our overall average lifespan is meant to be getting longer. You would think it would probably make more sense for the age of puberty to rise if our lifespans were indeed getting longer. But nature seems to disagree. So to understand why this is happening, we need to recognize a fundamental feature of the two sides of our lives we call childhood and adulthood. And more importantly, how these two sides relate to the two sides of our brain. So you all know the brain itself is divided into two hemispheres, the right side and the left. We can simplify the so-called characteristics of the two sides by saying that the left side is the analytical and the right side the abstract emotional. And yes, I know it's a total oversimplification to even suggest that, but it gives us a good starting point, and you'll see what I mean in just a moment. You see, we might not be fully aware of it, but we live our lives revolving around these two sides of the brain. The first stages of human life, for example, they embody the traits of the right hemisphere. As children, we live in the moment, focusing on our environment as we utilize our creativity and intuition to better understand our new surroundings. And yes, our analytical thought process, our memory, and other traits associated with the left side, they're also developing just as much as the traits of the right. But they'll only become the dominant influence in shaping who we are later on in life. So even though we start off our lives in the realm of the right side, we're never subjected to one side at one time. Our brain doesn't shut down on one side during childhood or adulthood. Both sides will be working together at all times as children and later on as adults. The only reason we're even able to observe this figurative imbalance towards either side is because the traits associated with each side are more apparent or more dominant at specific developmental stages. So we start off our journey in the symbolic realm of the right hemisphere. And as time goes by and childhood has run its course, we eventually reach the point where the right and left sides meet. This is the point of puberty. Here we move from the abstract world of a child into the analytical world of adulthood. And in this portion of our lives, we embody the traits of the left hemisphere, where our logic-based analytical approach starts to take over. Our emotions, our intuition, our creativity, they're all still here, but the way we engage with the world is no longer defined by these traits. So looking back, we can describe a child as a symbolic reflection of the right hemisphere, and an adult as a reflection of the left hemisphere. This movement around the brain is a fundamental part of our lives, and it applies to all living organisms. What we see as the start of life, the growth process, and death follow a strict path around the right and left sides of the brain. But what does all this have anything to do with the average age of puberty dropping? Well, we're not just moving in cycles around the brain as individuals, because this movement also applies to us as a collective. In fact, where we are around the brain as a collective is so much more interesting because it defines everything about us as individuals. You see, as a group, as a collective, we've also moved from collective childhood through puberty and into collective adulthood. You think it's a coincidence we uphold and reward the analytical thought process that pretty much defines our world today? Well, it wasn't always like this. We grew into it. And today, we find ourselves deep into the left hemisphere. Or more specifically, our planet's left hemisphere, which is great because it tells us exactly where we are on this map around the brain. So the more the brain of this planet grows, the more we, the brain cells, move deeper into its left hemisphere. And there just happens to be a very specific element of our being that helps us understand this. The deeper our planet moves into the left side, the more our left side as individuals will lengthen and the right side will shorten. You see, we think our lives are getting longer as time goes by, but it's only the left side of our lives, or the adult side, that is increasing, while the right side is in decline. This means that when one side moves forward, the other will move back. Moving deeper into the left side also means we're moving further away from the right. This increased lifespan we're currently seeing is not an overall longer life, but only the lengthening of one side of our lives, thanks to our planet moving deeper into the left hemisphere, and a shortening of the other side as our planet moves away from the right hemisphere. This is the reason our lives are getting longer, while the average age of puberty is actually dropping. When the time spent in adulthood increases, the time spent in childhood shortens. And the same will be true the other way around. Our lives, it seems, are not getting longer at all. But thankfully, the realization that we're moving around the brain means that the current lengthening of the left side and shortening of the right will at some point shift and start moving in the opposite direction. We'll soon see the average age of puberty rising, and the second part of our lives, the adult side, getting shorter. Can you imagine that happening? The age of puberty rising, and our time as adults getting shorter? But for that to happen, our planet needs to cross a second crucial point, where the left connects back into the right. But unlike the previous point of puberty, something else needs to happen for us to move from the realm of the adult left back to the infant right. This point can only be described as death and the rebirth that follows. Moving from the realm of the left side, or the left hemisphere, means moving from memory into no memory, moving from the analytical back to the abstract. We're changed completely as we cross this threshold of puberty, but that's nothing compared to crossing the second crucial point, from the left back to the right, and what could only be described as an infinite circling around one of nature's greatest constructs, our very own brain.